Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh everyone. My name is Dr. Sabia Gatti and it's my pleasure to give you this talk on lessons learned from Hajj 2026. But before I begin, I'd like you to imagine standing in a crowd of millions of people in temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius, pushing two wheelchairs and trying to keep your elderly parents safe, hydrated and spiritually focused, whilst also trying to complete the most important journey of your own life. That was my Hajj, my challenge, and you will have yours. And so I've put this presentation together to discuss traveling with elderly wheelchair users, my reflections, my practical advice, and the recommendations for the Ministry of Hajj, the Saudi service provider Al Bayt, and the UK provider Al Hidayah. So everything I'm going to discuss today falls into three broad areas. Firstly, I want to share some practical lessons that may help future pilgrims traveling with elderly parents, disabled relatives, or wheelchair users. Secondly, I would like to provide some constructive feedback to Nusuk, Al Bayt, and Al Hidayah. And there were many aspects of the journey that worked well, but there are also opportunities to improve communication, accessibility, and support for vulnerable pilgrims. Finally, I hope some of the recommendations, or to highlight some of the recommendations for the Ministry of Hajj and Umrah, as the number of elderly pilgrims continue to increase worldwide. So this year, I had the privilege of performing Hajj with my husband, who reverted to Islam, Alhamdulillah, and my elderly parents, both of whom required wheelchairs for long distances. And like many of you, I spent months preparing. I watched countless videos, I attended webinars, I studied the maps of Mina and Jamra, and thought I knew exactly what to expect. Actual fact, what I discovered was that Hajj is very different when you're responsible not only for yourself, but also for elderly parents who are dependent on you. And so there were moments of immense beauty and spirituality, but there were also moments of complete exhaustion. There were moments when complete strangers stepped forward to help us, and moments where simple things such as finding a ramp for the wheelchair, a toilet, a bath, or even a cup of hot water became unexpectedly difficult. And so today I want to share that journey, not as a complaint, not as a criticism, but as a reflection that I hope will help future pilgrims traveling with elderly parents or wheelchair users, and perhaps contribute to improving the Hajj experience for those who come after us. Most importantly, despite all the challenges I'm going to discuss today, Hajj was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. And if I had the chance to do it again, and inshallah I hope I do, I would do it again without any hesitation. So let's start at the very beginning with the preparation and the Nusuk application process. It's important to explain how the Hajj system structure is structured because many first-time pilgrims don't fully understand it, and I didn't when I first started. So at the top sits Nusuk, which is the official Hajj platform. And this is where you submit your application, upload your documents, top up your wallet, and purchase your package. Now, once you've secured a package, you then choose your Saudi service provider. In my case, this was Al Bayt, and they are responsible for much of the on-the-ground logistics in Saudi Arabia, including accommodation, transport arrangements, and camp management. And finally, there is a UK tour provider, which is attached to the Saudi service provider. And for me, this was Al Hidayah. And they provide the pre-Hajj preparation, educational webinars, spiritual guidance, and group leadership throughout the journey. Now, why is this important to understand? Because when things go well, the system works seamlessly and you are happy. But when problems arise, whether it's communication, transport, accommodation, or accessibility, it can sometimes be difficult for pilgrims to know who is responsible for resolving the issues. And so understanding these three layers helped me to make sense of many of the challenges I experienced in the journey, and also helped me to identify how potential improvements could be made. So the first stage of the journey for most pilgrims is the Nusuk application process. Overall, I have to say that the application itself is relatively straightforward. The platform is modern, the document upload system works well, and once you understand what's required, the actual submission process is not particularly difficult. My advice to future pilgrims would be to prepare your documents carefully before the application opens. The application process opens around early December. Don't bother filling out the application anytime sooner than that because the platform updates itself. Ensure your passport scans and photographs are of a high quality, and if you have more complex immigration status such as settled status or a non-UKA passport, upload some additional supporting evidence from the outset. So include 2 pieces of evidence in one PDF document. The challenges actually started after the submission. So in our case, the application would be approved and then suddenly go back into verification without an explanation. And so this created lots of uncertainty because we didn't know whether there was a problem with the actual platform or with the application itself. And so communication was probably the biggest weakness here. Emails from the NUSIC team often generated automated responses, and international calls became both expensive and frustrating because it was difficult to get a clear answer about what was actually needed. I really recommend the Yola app if you're going to make international calls. So as a result of this, what should have been an exciting period before Hajj, it all became a bit stressful. So looking back, I think a few relative simple improvements could make a significant difference. A clear status tracker, realistic timelines for verification, and access to trained staff who can explain exactly what the issue is and how to resolve it. It would hugely reduce the amount of anxiety for the pilgrims. But ultimately, people are preparing for one of the most important journeys of their lives. And so good communication is just as important as a good application system. So once your application is verified, we then choose a service provider, a Saudi service provider, and you can see all of these service providers on the NUSIC platform and their respective packages. So I spent a considerable amount of time researching the different options, reading reviews, attending webinars, and speaking to other pilgrims who had traveled previously. And so in the end, I chose Al Bayt because they had a strong reputation within the community, were highly visible on the online forum and search engines, and appeared to be proactive in engaging with the pilgrims through regular webinars. And so as someone traveling with elderly parents, that level of communication and reassurance was particularly important to me. So once a Saudi service provider has been selected, the next step was choosing the package they offered. In our case, we chose Al Bayt and shortlisted several packages before eventually securing the B3700 package. And to be honest, this wasn't actually my first choice. Ideally, I wanted Makkah first itinerary followed by a few days in Medina before returning home. However, those packages were associated with a different UK operator, I believe it was Dome. But ultimately, the B3700 package was the one we secured through the second round. And so when you're choosing a package, I would encourage the pilgrim, especially those traveling with elderly parents or wheelchair users, to look just beyond the price. Look beyond the price. The price is important, but you need to consider the duration of the trip. We're on a 14-day package, but 11 days is absolutely sufficient. Hotel location, accessibility, transport arrangements, and the distance from the key sites. Our UK operator was Al Hidayah, and one of the reasons I felt comfortable choosing them was their good reputation, their regular webinars, and the guidance that was provided by Sheikh Naeem, which I found reassuring throughout the preparation process. However, during the pilgrimage itself, I realised that supporting elderly pilgrims and wheelchair users presents unique challenges in itself. So whilst the spiritual guidance was excellent, I think there is an opportunity for all providers, including Al Hidayah, to develop a more specialised support system for the elderly and disabled pilgrims and their carers. So if you've been through the NUSIC process, you will probably recognise this slide immediately. And so looking back, securing the package was almost more stressful than the Hajj itself. I remember logging in 1.5 hours before the announced release time because everyone was saying, make sure you log in at 11 a.m. as the go live was around midday on the Sunday. And then the wait started. Nobody really knew what was happening. We were all sitting in front of our laptops, following the telegram groups, and sitting in a queuing system that was telling us 6 hours or even one day before entering into the system to book your package. And this resulted in a huge amount of stress and helplessness. Those who didn't secure a package in the first round were afraid to leave their computers in case they missed their opportunity. Perhaps more packages may become available. Many of us were checking updates late into the night, which affected sleep, concentration, and overall well-being. For me, this was particularly difficult because I wasn't just booking for myself. I was trying to secure a package for my husband and my elderly parents, knowing how much this journey meant to them as well. And so the challenge wasn't simply that the demand for the packages was high. It was high, but the lack of clarity about what was happening behind the scenes. A few relatively simple changes could make a huge difference, including clear communication about what to expect on the day, realistic timelines for package releases, what is actually going to happen to the platform when millions are trying to book their packages across the globe at the same time. Regular updates from Nusuk and the Saudi providers would go a mile. And most importantly, real-time information so the pilgrim knows where they stand and what they should do if they get into the system, and if the package is still available, including the group flights, and if it isn't available, or if it is available with no group flights, should they book custom flights? Alhamdulillah, we managed to secure a package through the next round with the help of a guardian angel. Hotel selection matters more than you think. So when you're traveling with wheelchair users, proximity to the Haram is only one part of the accessibility. Factors such as gate closures, steep gradients, traffic flow, blocked ramps, the ease of reaching the prayer area is really important. So careful hotel selection can significantly reduce your physical strain. And so here are some examples of the hotels that were included in the packages for 2026. So in our package, we have the Conrad. It's very close to the Haram, 4 minutes away. But the problem with the Conrad is that there were gate closures outside of the hotel due to overcrowding. So the police closed the gates. So you had to get into the Haram Sharif more than 2 hours before the prayer times. The Hilton Convention, which was part of the Makkah itinerary first, was close to the Haram. It was about 10 minutes, I would say, but it had a steep hill. So although it was great coming down, you're going down the hill, try imagine pushing a wheelchair up the hill to get back to the hotel. There were other hotels too, like Makkah Hotel and the Swiss Hotel, but they are inside the Haram, but they were part of the other packages. In Medina, there was the Makkah Medina Hotel, which was part of our package. It was good for women, 7 minutes walk, and you're inside the mosque. The problem with the Makkah Medina was that the ramps outside the hotels were blocked by coaches, by cars, so we couldn't really use them. So we had to go round to try and cross the roads. And there were other hotels like the Millennium Al Aqib, which was part of the 11-day packages. And again, they were good for women too. 5 minutes walk away, and again, no problems with the traffic. So the 11-day packages did have their advantages. So our trip started in Medina. Medina always feels more peaceful and unhurried. It definitely gave me the space to reflect, connect spiritually, and learn more about the seerah. The slower pace made it easier to appreciate the experience. Rhoda was one of the most meaningful parts of the trip, but there are a few things I wish someone had explained beforehand. Firstly, booking is through the Nusuk mobile app, which is different from the online Nusuk website, and you need to download that on your phones. The appointments can be difficult to secure. They open up 2 weeks before your date, so planning ahead really helps. More importantly, take the time to understand the history before you do the Rhoda. So visiting the Medina Museum and learning about the Hijrah, the Prophet ﷺ's home, and the original layout of the mosque, I think completely changed my experience. I understood what had happened there, and that made the visit far more powerful and my du'as so much more meaningful. So this is just a glimpse inside Medina Museum. And I have to say, it was one of the hidden gems of the trip. We organised this ourselves. It wasn't done via Al Hidayah. And so seeing the history of Medina and the Prophet ﷺ's life visually explained gave me a much deeper meaning and an understanding of the Roda and Masjid al-Nabawi. Okay, and so I'm showing you a video of the gates of Jannah, then the gates of Bibi Aisha's house, and then the gate and the door through which Prophet ﷺ entered to do his prayer in this area. We could see what Mount Hira looked like, and the entrance to the cave, and Mount Thud, and also the journey, the hijrah, which Prophet ﷺ took from Mecca to Medina. It was excellent, and it's a must. If you go to Medina, visit the Medina Museum. So, Rhoda itself was emotional, it was rushed and overwhelming all at once, okay? And you come away thinking, what happened there? And then on our final morning in Medina, something beautiful happened to us, right? My mum and I entered quietly through gate 333. Make a note of this gate, really, whilst wearing our ihram because we were going to be departing for Makkah to do our Umrah. And so we walked calmly through the mosque, through these gates, as I've shown you in the picture, and suddenly found ourselves walking underneath the green dome or near the green dome. And so without any crowds, any shouting, any chaos, no pushing, guess what? I was able to pray peacefully and make dua in complete stillness in front of the gates of Jannah. I will never forget that moment. I had so much time to pray, make my duas. It was beautiful. So part 4, I'd like to cover Makkah wheelchair access around the Haram Sharif. Okay, so the Haram has made significant improvements in accessibility, but there are still practical challenges for wheelchair users and their carers. And so dedicated wheelchair lanes on the first and the second floor of the Haram are often crowded, making movement difficult, and there is an increased risk of collisions as well. And I have the bruises to prove it. With other wheelchairs yanking into the back of your legs with no fault of their own. I guess I would probably blame the paid wheelchair drivers who try and whiz through people through the tiniest gaps and then ended up causing crashes. And so carers can also find it physically demanding to navigate through busy areas, people not watching the wheelchairs, getting hurt, and then giving carers the look. And you as the carer are having to apologize to them when it's not even your own fault. But don't despair, right? Apologize and move on. And sometimes it's safer to perform tawaf slowly outside the designated wheelchair lanes, but go slow and be mindful of of other pilgrims. So many pilgrims are also unaware that of the buggy services that are available within the Haram Sharif, which I will cover in the next few slides. And so my recommendations for the Ministry of Hajj would be some small changes, such as dedicated wheelchair time slots, maybe wider, clearer marked wheelchair circuits, and this could make the experience so much safer and more comfortable for everyone. Access points for wheelchair users. So these are just some of the access points for wheelchair users I've listed. Okay, I've listed the gates here where ramp access is available. Okay, and you can access the first floor through gate 79, as I've shown you in this picture here, which is a direct route. And you can also access the second floor via the lifts on the right from the inside of gate 79. So the lifts to the second floor are through gate 79. So here is the official wheelchair and buggy service within the Haram itself. These services can be booked at designated mobility service points. There are three main points. One was near Gate 66, basically facing the Hilton Convention or Anjum Hotel, but on the inside of the Haram. And the other is opposite Al Safa Hotel, so near Gate 91, but outside of the Haram. And the third access point, so this third access point here was closed, but it is at Marwa and it's going to open soon. Both manual wheelchairs and electric buggies are available with different pricing options depending on whether you need to do the tawaf, the sa'i, or both. And there are also discounted services available for eligible pilgrims with disability and the elderly. The prices are fixed, and you can also opt for unofficial wheelchair services, but my understanding is that the prices really do vary, so be very careful not to get ripped off. My advice is to locate these service points early in your trip, depending on your hotel location, as they can save considerable time and energy and physical strain for both carers and the wheelchair users. Now, did you know that there are access points to book wheelchairs and buggy services at certain hotels? So one was at Anjum Hotel, and as I've shown you here in the picture here, this is Anjum Hotel. And the other was at Makkah Hotel, which is accessible through the MCDCE building inside of the Haram near gate 79 or 84. They are based in the lobby, so the official booking services are based in the lobby, so you don't need to be staying at the hotel to access them. They wear official clothing, as I've shown you here, and so they're easy to spot. And so this is what the official wheelchair looks like. Okay, and so they're very different from those who do their private wheelchair services. Part 5. Let's talk about Mina, the biggest challenge. So unfortunately, we were unable to secure the Major al-Qabs camp and therefore had to stay at the Muwaisim. And I guess the only main disadvantage is the distance to the Jamra, which is 45 minutes as opposed to 10 minutes if you're staying at Major al-Qabs and traveling by coach rather than train to the different Hajj sites. And so I can't tell you what my experience of the Major al-Qabs was like, as I've never stayed there or been there. And so I'm only going to talk about the Muwaisim European camp. Okay, as you can see from the picture, there was a steep ramp at the entrance. Very difficult for wheelchair users. I couldn't get my mum's wheelchair up the ramp, and either someone had to help me or I had to make her stand up and walk up the few steps. But if someone was completely wheelchair dependent, you would struggle. The corridors were narrow, as I've shown you, and very difficult to drive the wheelchair when it was crowded with people. The kitchens were great. They were clean. There were coffee kiosks. There were ice cream vending machines. There was somewhere to make tea, coffee. There's plenty of water and juices all stocked up in the vending machines as well. So as you can appreciate, the dormitories were packed with very little space to walk, to pray. It was noisy because there's no partitioning between the different sections. And so in one tent, there was approximately 100 people, if not more. It's important to take a photo of your dormitory front door because if you get lost and need help finding it back, you need the number and the code. I also found that there was simply not enough female support staff who could speak English or even French, let alone Gujarati, Urdu, or Hindi, who you could communicate with adequately. And so that's when Google Translate really helped, but it was frustrating. So my advice is download it because if you can't communicate in English, you really are going to struggle. So during my stay at Mina, I only came across one member of staff from the Al Bayt team who was actually taking care of the pilgrims from another package who was assigned additional pilgrims from the B3700 package. Now, there may have been other Al Bayt providers there, but they were not visible. I think that it is, for one person, it was too much. one member of staff, and may Allah reward her. But she really needed some help in managing those who were suffering with heat stroke, dehydration, but also trying to sort out the logistics for the women and the wheelchair users. And so this is where Al Bayt could really shine, bring in more female staff who are hands-on with the pilgrims. I think it's really important. I think one of the most important things I learned was to obtain a map of the camp as soon as you arrive. The camp layout can be confusing, it's like a maze, and without a map, it's very easy to get lost. My mother became separated from me and was understandably distressed when she couldn't find her way back. And although she asked a member of staff, language barrier made communication really difficult. Fortunately, whilst the staff member was giving me directions using her camp map, I took the initiative of taking a photo of it with her permission, which proved invaluable throughout our stay. There was also a helpful 3D map in the men's section, but access to the information was not always obvious. So, adding to the challenge, the men's and the women were in our group were housed in different areas of the camp. So our camp was based here in A40 and the men's camp was based here in A6. And so what looks close on paper can involve a considerable walk through a maze of tents, especially in the heat. It was not easy. Okay, so my take-home message here is before settling into your camp, make sure you have access to a map and save a photo of it on your phone. It may be one of the most useful preparations you're going to make for your Mina camp. One main concern many people have about Mina is the bathroom facilities. But in my experience, they were better than expected. There were plenty of toilets, showers were available, provided you avoided the busiest times. They were great. I was particularly pleased to see accessible facilities which offered more space and made it much easier to maintain personal hygiene. The sinks were also well designed for wuzu. You know what? It's not a 5-star hotel, but it's perfectly adequate. Okay, so my main advice is to use the facilities responsibly. Avoid flushing toilet paper or toilet seat covers as blockages can quickly affect water availability for everyone. In fact, you don't need toilet seat covers, they just become soggy. Okay, so don't bring them. If you don't see bins to throw your toilet paper, ask for them. They were not available for us on day 1, and then the toilets did get blocked. But by day 3, we had bins, as you can see, both inside and outside of the toilets. So no worries about the toilet facilities in the Mina camp. They were all good as far as I'm concerned. So here are some of my recommendations of what the ministry could do to improve the Muasim camp. And this is a wish list. Okay, a wider ramp at the entrance would be a dream come true, I think. You don't need the steps, just put in a ramp as I've shown you in this AI generated image. The accessibility routes as I've shown you here, they need to be wider. Better camp maps would help. There was an issue with vegetarian options and hot water. I survived on the pot noodles, but the Minister of Hajj found out and a tray of vegetables and fruits was sent to us, which I think was a really nice touch from the ministry. But simple things like yogurt with granola and honey works really well in hot weather for the Europeans. Lots of fruit, particularly bananas and plain bread, so that you can make your own sandwiches, again works really well for us. So these are just some of the tips, okay? My recommendations would be to bring your own energy bars, and I've given you an example of what I took with me. I find them particularly delicious. They contain fruits and nuts, and I use them, my husband uses them, we use them when we're running half marathons and marathons, so I particularly recommend those. Make sure you take your electrolytes daily. We didn't receive the nusrat bags with all these lovely treats, but bring your own bag to collect your stones. Fans with the spray so that you can keep cool. Eye masks is an absolute must. and the best earplugs you can get your hands on, right? Because you are really going to need them in the current setup. When you're out there, especially out of state of Ihram, you're going to be spending 3 nights in Mina and you will be sleep deprived. A gentle reminder to everyone, please treat this camp as you would treat your own home. And this goes for both men and women. Please don't leave food trays outside your dormitories. It's so disrespectful. Once you've finished eating, return them to the kitchen. Don't be lazy. Help keep the camp clean by disposing the rubbish properly. And if you cannot find a bin bag, please collect one from the kitchen. Ask for them if you don't see them. If you notice that the bins are full, please lend a hand by emptying them or informing a member of staff. Corridors must be kept clean at all times and clear, as they serve as emergency exit routes. Rubbish and other items left in these areas can create a safety hazard for everyone, and especially our disabled pilgrims. And so by taking responsibility for our shared environment, we're going to help create a clean and a safe space for all. And so every small act of care and consideration makes a massive difference. We are blessed to be in such a place and a sacred place, right? So if we look after it together, the rewards of our efforts and good deeds will be ours to share. So please be mindful. Please be mindful. So as you can see from the image on the left, the current dormitory layout was crowded with very limited space and no dedicated area for praying. Pilgrims often had to fold up beds to create room to pray. People chatting, people switching lights on and off. It really made it difficult to maintain a spiritually focused environment. At times you couldn't think. And so I have taken the opportunity of developing a proposed layout, again through AI, for the help of AI, that accommodates the same number of pilgrims whilst creating a dedicated prayer area, organized storage, shoe racks and waste stations. And these simple changes would create a cleaner, safer and a more organized environment, helping pilgrims on what matters most, their spiritual journey. It will keep the corridors clear and safe. This is just one example and can be modified, and I really hope the Ministry of Hajj will consider a layout such as this one and put the needs of the pilgrims first. And I'd be very happy to work with them on this. And as these images show, pilgrims dried their clothes wherever space was available, on railings, on partitions between the men's and the women's areas, and even on the ground behind the toilet facilities. Given the intense heat and the heavy sweating, clothes often remain damp and developed an unpleasant odor. And so making regular washing and drying essential. And so a simple and a practical solution would be to install a dedicated wall-mounted drying rail, as illustrated here in this photograph I've presented, and encouraging pilgrims to either bring lightweight portable hangers if the ministry doesn't want to provide their own. And I think this would really improve hygiene, organisation, and the overall experience for the pilgrim. Part 6, Arafah. So, Arafah was spiritually powerful beyond words. Despite the exhaustion from the Mina camp, being together as a family, making dua was an incredible or emotional journey. Listening to the heartfelt duas while surrounded by pilgrims reminded me of why we had come here. A word of warning, we were taken to another tent on the plains of Arafah, and we didn't really see the mount as you do on YouTube videos, which I think really disappointed my husband. And so it would be nice for the Al Bayt team to have given us this information as to how we could go to the mount if we wanted to, or provided a guide to take us to the mount. For me, Muzdalifah surprisingly became one of the most peaceful nights of my life. Sleeping under stars with my parents, my husband, and fellow pilgrims stripped everything back to simplicity. We bought our own yoga mats and inflatable pillows, which really helped despite the ongoing traffic. This is not always provided. The yoga mats and inflatable pillows are not always provided, so be mindful of that. Bring some of your own snacks because you may get peckish whilst you're in Muzdalifah. Expect queues for the toilets. For me, Muzdalifah was probably the best night of my life. There were no distractions, just humanity, faith, and complete dependence on Allah. It was the best night of my life, I promise. Part 7, Jamrah. So the walk to Jamrah with wheelchairs, and I'm going to be honest, was brutal. Heat, crowds, it was an uphill route, and exhaustion pushed everyone to their limits. I saw people collapsing from dehydration and heat stroke on the roads. And this was really distressing to see because as a doctor, or as doctors, both myself and my husband, we feel the need to go and help. But at the same time, I had to take care of myself and my parents. On day 1 of Jamrah, we managed to get back to the Mina camp before the group. After spending the whole night in the Muzdalifah camp, we just managed to get on the bus at the beginning of the queue. And so we decided we were going to make our way to the Jamrah before the blazing sun came out in force. And so it was quite straightforward. We followed Google Maps, we followed the crowd, and we got there. But at Jamrah, a police officer saw our struggle and personally cleared a path through the crowd, and so we could safely complete the stoning ritual. I'm sure Allah sent him to us. I will never forget that kindness, that moment. It was superb. Now, day 2, we went to the Jamrah for the stoning with the guide, as you can see from this picture with the lollipop, and stuck with them like glue. He cleared the path for us, and that day the Albait guides were my heroes. Okay, they were really good, knew what they were doing, and may Allah accept their du'as of Brother Harun, Shafiq, and Hussein. The Ministry of Hajj have created tunnels to give us some relief from the heat and the sun. But please make sure you have plenty of water, take your electrolytes that day. It's an absolute must. And after you finish the stoning, the police will direct you towards Makkah, and it's also well signposted. And so you need to go down the escalators, and there are some water fountains to fill your bottles, so don't throw your bottles away. Bring a cooling bag with you to keep your water cool, or a water bladder with a cooling bag. You also need some cooling towels for the neck, UV umbrellas for the men and visors for the women. And if you can buy a backpack which holds an umbrella, I would recommend it, as my husband was pushing my dad's wheelchair and I had to hold the umbrella for him whilst ensuring my mum was okay maneuvering her electric wheelchair without crashing into people. So it was a bit tricky at times. The walk back to Makkah was around 1.5 hours, and for us it was straightforward because we're pretty fit. And we followed Google Maps. The buses just looked horrendous. They looked crowded and chaotic. But other pilgrims said to us they managed to get on the bus within 10 minutes of waiting. We didn't particularly want to wait, so we soldiered through, basically. You really do have to stay fit, and I would really recommend, before you go and do your Hajj, you should be doing at least 20 to 30,000 steps per day. Okay, that's the level of fitness that you require. So my tips for Jamrah: keep cool and calm. It will feel overwhelming. And if you are with your guys, they will help move people out of the way for you. And if you're on your own, walk round the Jamrah, as it is slightly quieter than the entrance to the stone itself. You might have to use some Arabic lingo to get people to move out of the way. Saying things like wheelchair coming through simply doesn't work. But this word, Tarek, did the job, and I used it all the time, okay? A word to remember for those pushing wheelchairs. And when heading towards Makkah, listen to the police. Don't argue with them, which people have a tendency to do so. Follow their advice. The escalators worked for us, as we had to fold up the wheelchairs, and my parents were able to go down the escalators without any problems. But for those who are totally dependent on wheelchairs, there are lifts to get you down, so don't worry. I know I mentioned this on the previous slide, but these are the things that a must when you're doing the Jumrah. Electrolytes, take them. Cooling towels, UV umbrellas, spray bottles, a water bladder with a cooling system so that you can continuously drink because you will sweat. Don't worry about the toilets. You will not need the toilet. Hats and visors are important too. You know, there were moments throughout Hajj where complete strangers stepped in to help, offering shade, spraying water, offering to help to push the wheelchair, clearing the path through the crowds in Jumrah, or simply making du'as for one another. And you know, these moments for me restored my faith in humanity. So, my feedback for Nusuk and the Ministry of Hajj. So, for Nusuk, provide real-time updates during package releases, improve customer service escalation systems, replace automated responses with live support teams during peak periods. On the platform, when reviewing packages, clearly label wheelchair-friendly hotels, accessibility distances, transport suitability, and camp layouts, and producing official guides specifically for elderly pilgrims, carers, women, and disabled pilgrims, I think is a must. Ministry of Hajj really needs to think about that. And create a dedicated wide wheelchair lane during the Tawaf and Sa'i, which are not cramped and not overtaken by fast wheelchair experts who are the ones actually causing the crashes. Providing priority access routes for the elderly and disabled pilgrims, I think, will go a long way. If they are there, you need to make them clearly visible to us. In Mina, improve ramp gradients, increase shaded areas along the Jumrah walking routes, such as electronic umbrellas like the ones we see in Medina. Guarantee clear bedding for us, hot water, vegetarian European meal options, and ensure that the toilets are functioning at all times. Reducing the overcrowding in the Muasim camp is a must. Perhaps consider aeroplane-style meal distributions rather than us having to queue for hours at the canteen and then to find that the food is cold. Install clearer multilingual accessibility signage, perhaps. Employ staff who are multilingual. Employ women for the European camp who can communicate in English. It's a must. Improve designated women's prayer area because, it's a place where we want to be spiritually connected. We want to be able to pray. Bin and clothing facilities, as I've presented. Increase cooling stations and hydration points. Introduce heat stroke awareness campaigns. And have a dedicated webinar for pilgrim education on etiquettes, do's and don'ts at the campsites, and logistics, I think, in greater detail. And keep us informed. Communication is key here. My feedback for Al Bayt, I think better coordination. Improve your communication with the Muasim pilgrims. Ensure there's equal support regardless of the package tier. I've shown you a picture here of all these women throwing petals on us on arrival and returning home. But where were they when we needed them in the Muasim camp? They were invisible. I only saw one individual. So increase female staff presence in the women's camp. Provide visible welfare officers. There are many able-bodied, intelligent women like myself who would be more than willing to support your services to improve the experience of the pilgrims. So perhaps tap into us. I hope my presentation is a reflection of this and will go on to help many pilgrims, especially wheelchair users. For wheelchair logistics, offer luggage assistance for carers. Don't expect us to take our luggage to the hotel rooms and bring it down for you. A little bit of assistance goes a long way. Ensure transport staff are trained to handle mobility equipment carefully. These wheelchairs are expensive. Communicate with us when we are waiting to get on to buses. And don't leave us behind the able-bodied individuals. Maybe prioritize the carers and the wheelchair users. And we need to have an understanding of the logistics of getting from one place to the next. So you really need to try and communicate that with us. My feedback to Al Hidayah. Overall, I would encourage greater awareness and support for elderly pilgrims and those with disabilities. Dedicated support teams for wheelchair users would be extremely valuable, and elderly pilgrims should be prioritised during bus boarding and transfers. And these are relatively simple measures that could be communicated clearly to both staff and the pilgrims and would significantly enhance the experience for vulnerable groups. I would also recommend improving clarity of instructions and timings. Clearly, delays are sometimes unavoidable. We understand that. However, repeated delays without explanations can be really frustrating. And for example, on our departure day, pilgrims were informed via telegram that the buses would be leaving promptly at midnight. And so, although the buses had arrived, there were extended celebrations and cake cutting ceremonies before departure. We were not informed of this. And while such moments are appreciated, we appreciate that Al Bayt and Al Hidayah want to celebrate their success. I think better communication of any changes to the schedule would have allowed some pilgrims to remain in their rooms and rest, particularly after a physically demanding journey and an emotionally significant farewell to the house of Allah. Finally, I would strongly recommend assigning specific staff members to support vulnerable pilgrims throughout the pilgrimage. Accessibility briefings before Mina and Jamra days would also help pilgrims better understand the challenges ahead and support availability to them. These relative small interventions could make a substantial difference to the safety, the comfort, and overall experience of the elderly and the disabled pilgrims. Advice for future pilgrims traveling with elderly parents. So use tracking devices such as AirTags, attach one to the wheelchair, attach one to each of your luggages, carry electrolyte tablets, take them daily, bring cooling towels, use UV umbrellas and spray bottles, take earplugs and eye masks, portable fans with water sprays. You need power banks for the Mina camp because in our camp the power sockets didn't work. Cycle locks to secure your wheelchairs is a must. Inflatable pillows and yoga mats really help for Muzdalifah. Pack high energy snacks and hydration salts. Learn some key Arabic words for crowd navigation. And be mentally prepared for patience, delays, and unpredictability. And most importantly, focus on the spiritual purpose of Hajj and support one another with kindness and compassion. So, if I had to summarize my Hajj experience in 10 key lessons, these would be them. Okay, some are practical. Prepare for the heat, carry electrolytes, learn the wheelchair routes, and protect your sleep in Mina. Really important. For your mindset, expect delays, be patient, and use communication tools wisely. And most importantly, trust Allah. Hajj is not just a physical journey, it's a lesson in resilience, adaptability, and faith. So Hajj taught me patience, gratitude, and reliance upon Allah. And caring for my parents was not a burden. It was one of the greatest acts of worship of my life. And so may Allah accept the Hajj of all pilgrims and make future journeys easier for the elderly, disabled, and their carers. Assalamu alaikum.